Greetings, my name is Michael Miller. This is a Michael Miller trademark training video live on YouTube. Out to you because you're watching, meant for Michael Miller Pilates licensed affiliates, anybody interested in surviving as a Pilates instructor, or interested in core and tension for their own movement, or whatever movement they instruct beyond or other than Pilates. There's construction going on, so I'm going to observe the lull, and I don't have much to talk about today. Just two things. How to observe. There we go. How to observe. If you're in a training program or running a training program, one part of that training manual can be instructions on how to observe. Because I had a familiar experience that I didn't realize until hindsight. Someone observed an hour that I taught and had no questions and no comments and seemed to be more overwhelmed than anything about what had just happened. So, how to observe. Where does the instructor stand? What kind of language does the instructor use? Is it explaining language? Is it thinking or thinking? Or is it instruction? Doing, doing, doing? Are there words that show up frequently that are just filler words? You know? Or what we're going to do now, the word gonna never gets here. So you observe how the teacher uses language to make the class happen, where they stand, where they move, how they correct one person in a class that doesn't distract from others. What was the correction? Why was the correction? What stood out that made you go make that change? Those are the kind of questions when you're observing. Why did you go from this exercise to that exercise? Why didn't you do this? See, a lot of times the question is on what I left out. But as a duck, my feet are paddling as best they can under the surface when I'm instructing. And there's always a long list of what I could have done and left out. So the question is, why did what you did rise to the level of actually being taught? And then from what to what and why? And write down every key phrase. It sounds like a key phrase in your notebook, because they're usually key because they're polished and inherited from other people who polished them before you, and so grab the language that you can. Then tactile cueing. It all depends on the environment that you're in, but in my interaction in instructing, I have a waiver that's signed, a release that's signed, and I ask permission generally before I touch, right? Because they're more receptive to whatever the touch is supposed to communicate if they know the touch is coming, right? Tactile cue, wherever. And so observing how a person cues tactily, big thing. All right, so if you want to help your student learn how to do this, and they're at that stage where they're willing to devote time to observe someone else teaching, then the more they know about how to observe, the better. Oh, standing and proximity. I had a person come and sit right down within 2 feet of where I was about to teach this student on the reformer. And for me, that was just way too close. And so your choice of proximity in terms of how close are you, and ideally you're far enough away to not be in that bubble, but you can see and hear what's going on. And that if you happen to change your position to get a different view of what you're observing, it could easily be that it's for some other reason, not because what you are observing is in focus or obvious. If you're observing, limit it to that, because it's all too easy to interject yourself into the session by making comment or asking question. That's why questions and comments come at the end of a session you're observing, not during. And perhaps in watching a session, if it's in a group or especially in a private session, in what's being done, ask yourself, how could this go south? And by go south, I mean take an unexpected turn of events and result in injury. You know, how can this be bad? Because when you're watching where an instructor stands or teaches or moves to, the more experienced they are, I would believe, that their intuition places them where they know they need to be, not perhaps where they're most visible, but perhaps where they're most protective. And then, you know, what does the teacher teach toward? What is their cueing? If it's a Michael Miller kind of a point of view, the cueing is all about do this to listen to this feeling and take more control based on your grasp of the sensation you're getting from your effort, right? Is the instruction causality, or causal is a technical word for that, but there's one cue say, do this in order to do that. Squeeze your legs together in order to cause your exhale, right? That ties 2 of your cues together, dependent one upon the other, and ordered in time. It has a huge impact on how well you initiate and continue your movement. Number 2, because there's a lot more, but the more you start a list of how to observe and think of the different faculties that the human being has to absorb information through in terms of touch, sound, sight, smell, and taste. Mind wants its own recognition. An observer doesn't care because it's there, recognized or not. So number two, I'm distributing flyers, which is sort of fun because it's all the local Pilates studios, first closest to me yesterday, and then a satellite of studios today, and then another satellite tomorrow. Just handing out this flyer that promotes my course on udemy.com. Udemy.com is how I say it. Some people say Udemy or udemy.com. how to survive as a Pilates instructor. And I'm happy that it's out there and available. And it's the most important stuff that I have to profess as a Pilates instructor. And hopefully it's structured, or you can see the structure of the course as being what you have in your hand as you're giving your personal impression of the material. See? You got to memorize 5 things. In an order helps, and to the extent that you haven't memorized and you know the order, you're then free to interpret and explain what you have memorized. Okay? Life can't live forever. Read between the lines. See behind the curtain. Add 2 and 2. Add 2 and 2. Direct your thinking. Direct your thinking. It's a loaded 3 words. Direct your thinking. And then the biggest loaded word for me, of course, is Geist.